And I first want to start out with saying a big thank you to you, Dicken. I'm so grateful for your participation in the free webinar series and also for your participation in the 7-month program. And you know, Dicken, for those of you who don't know him, has been sharing the principles for a very long time. You worked directly with Sydney Banks, were mentored by him. You originally were working as a psychologist and became a corporate trainer, and now are really developing other practitioners and really sharing it in your Change the World program, which I've heard so many good things about. So just grateful that you're sharing this understanding in the world in the way that you are, and that we get to experience you in this way. And so for today, when Dick and I were just checking in briefly about this webinar, what I shared with him is that I really appreciate how Dicken speaks to this understanding and the spiritual nature of this understanding. And there can sometimes feel like there's different camps in the principles community, and one of the areas that people I think are expanding into and seeing more around is this whole area of oneness and non-duality. And I think it's such a beautiful direction to look in. And for myself personally, I feel that it's completely aligned with how I hear and read the teachings of Sydney Banks. And Dicken, you speak to this so beautifully, and when I've heard you share. And so I thought for today, that could be really the direction that we're looking in. And to me, it really sets, like when we were talking about the program the first time, and you were the first teacher that I had sharing, and we talked about how that was kind of setting a tone for the whole program. Because for me, that tone and that feeling, it just opens us up to who we are, to our true nature, to the home that is within. And even though there's not a tangible thing to do to get there, there's something about us all coming together, listening with an open mind and an open heart and looking in that direction that seems to just evoke the beauty of that and bring it forward in a feeling way. So that's the direction we're going to be looking in. And Dick, and I don't know if there's anything specific that you wanted to start with, or if you want me to just ask a question. What are your thoughts?
I want you to ask questions, but I wanted to say hi to everybody. Hey, thanks for coming by today. And wow, it's great to see so many wonderful folks here. And I've been looking forward to this, so I think we'll jump right in. But I want to thank you, Rohini, for pulling together this party.
Yeah.
You are quite the party host, let me tell you, hostess with the mostest. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Well, it's really such a joy to be able to just be in this conversation and to have so many of you join in. And there's definitely going to be lots of time for any questions or reflections that you'd like to share. But to start off with, Dicken, why don't we start with sort of where you know, where this started for you in terms of your journey. I know that you've had a wide exploration of spiritual understandings before coming across the principles. So you really came to the understanding with a very strong spiritual orientation in your life. And I'd love to kind of hear what that shift for you was with the principles, or I know it wasn't called the principles at that point in time, but when you came across Sydney Banks's teachings, what was different and what really spoke to you?
My story is very short. I was very insecure, so I was constantly seeking, and things would help temporarily, but I still was insecure and constantly seeking. And then at some point I met this wildly ordinary man, Sydney Banks. And when I heard him talk, my searching stopped for just a moment. And when it stopped, when I stopped thinking that I could be better and do better, I discovered my own presence and well-being. And I was blown away that it could be that simple. So I got intrigued, and for a while when I listened to the principles, I was still approaching it as searching for something that's going to make me feel better. And as time has gone on, it's just allowed me to be more comfortable with being an ordinary schmuck who just gets a big kick out of life. So that's my story.
And what a relief that is to get to be ordinary and not have to
What
be
a
special.
relief. I never wanted to be ordinary. And now to be ordinary is just a minute ago, I was sitting outside with a friend on our deck, and just the feel of the wind and the sparkling of the light on the ocean and the red-tailed hawk that was soaring around overhead. And there was just such a serenity and a peace and a magic to this ordinary moment. And I used to miss those moments so much because I was trying so hard to figure out how to be more spiritual. So that's what I've liked about an understanding of the principles, is I just have a lot of less thinking about all of this. Just a lot less.
And what did, I'm curious, what was it that you heard differently that had you see this? Like, what shifted for you?
Well, it gave me hope that I could be free of my old thinking, my conditioned thinking, that I didn't have to live governed by my unconscious thoughts, that I could experience a freedom from the limitations of my own thinking. And I had an experience of that during my very first time I was listening to people talk about the principles. And I was delighted. I was delighted. And the notion that we have everything that we're looking for already, and that it's just being caught up in a limited conceptual framework that keeps us unhappy and searching. But when we fall out of that thinking, there's unbelievable, ordinary, free presence. And that's our true nature and our true self. And it's always there underneath the turmoil of our thinking. And I just love that. I mean, it immediately changed my parenting. It immediately helped me to be less involved in a lot of the thinking that I was doing. It allowed me to fall open and then discover over and over and over again that when my mind is open and receptive, for no reason, I start to feel better. No reason. Unconditional gifts, free to anyone. And when I would feel better, I would have an easier time of parenting, an easier time of really connecting to my wife and paying less and less attention to my thinking that created a sense of separation and difference and judgment and limitation.
Yeah, that freedom, knowing that, as you're saying, that innate nature is right there underneath all of the stirred up thinking, the conceptual mind that we can get caught up in. And from this understanding, there's no technique to get out of the caught up thoughts. There's no technique used to manage thinking, which, from my understanding, from what you shared, is what you were doing previously. And so, in terms of your experience, was it simply in the seeing that it was right there that allowed things to shift?
Yeah, I equate it to how I learned how to ride a bike. I mean, I can remember the absolute I had as a kid that I could get on something and take off and go places far and fast and, and explore. And I learned how to ride a bicycle really quickly, and it was not through effort and struggle. It was just at a certain point, I knew something about balance I didn't know before, and it had nothing to do with my intellect. And it went from being extremely hard to a little easier. And then with further understanding, it got easier and easier. So we've not appreciated this kind of learning very much in our culture. We've become enamored with information learning, which is how the intellect gathers and sorts and analyzes and stores and retrieves information. And most of schooling is based around this kind of learning. And Sid Banks, my teacher, made very clear intellectual learning won't help you understand your well-being or your true self or your capacity for unconditional love and wisdom. Your intellect cannot help you with that. It wasn't designed for that. It's built around the development of concepts, and any concept cannot grasp what lies beyond concepts. It's impossible. And so Sid revitalized, in my mind, insight learning as not only valid, but essential for the realizations that raise our overall level of well-being. And so I got very, very intrigued by insight learning and how we're, as human beings, we're built for insight. I've never met anybody, it doesn't matter what their past has been like, or their personality, or their family, or their circumstance. Human beings are built to have new thinking, but you can't think your way to new thinking. And that's why I had trouble with the principles at first. I kept trying to think my way to understanding. And it's because I thought it was an intellectual understanding like everything else. And the paradox is when I stop thinking about or stop trying to understand, stop trying to analyze and figure out, I right away started feeling more peaceful. Just the interruption of our constant trying to get something or get somewhere. Just for a moment, the world stops, and there's just, what's left is just presence, just this. As you are, as we are, as I am, as life is. Just presence. And there's no conflict here, no problem, no judgment, no separation, no difference, just this. Now, Rohini, it's just on my own exploration of this and insight into this, and because I've gotten into grooving on my grandkids' state of mind and their standing under of the intellect, everybody starts off for the first couple of years in what you could call a non-dual experience of life. There's not even me and mom at first, or me and Dad. There's not even a me. There's just awareness and presence and aliveness. And it's an awake and alive, sensory-filled, responsive presence that we live in. And then we're given this gift of being able to use our mind in a different way than non-conceptually, than the immediacy of experience unmediated by concepts and ideas and beliefs. That's one way of, in a sense, that the mind operates. There's another way, which is developing ideas and beliefs and concepts. Now, my grandson is 2.5, and he is thrilled with the world of duality and concepts and ideas. Why is it? It's the foundation of language. Without concepts, you wouldn't be able to communicate other than through grunts and groans and hand signals. Concepts have a purpose and a use. There is nothing inherently wrong with the conceptual mind. It's a tool. Sid Banks it's a tool that, like any tool, can be used wisely or unwisely. But as soon as we think about anything, we're in the world of concepts. And every concept has an opposite. So you have me, and then you have a you. You have high, then you have low. You have this, then you have that. It's the foundation of language. It's the foundation of thinking conceptually so that we can plan and have memory and imagine a past and a future. We can now ask our grandson, what happened yesterday? And he can tell us what happened yesterday, because now conceptually he can conceive of a past. It's an illusion, but for language, it's fun to say what you did yesterday. It's fun to think about what you're going to do tomorrow sometime. And as we get older, we begin to get more and more enamored with the world of ideas and thoughts. And in a sense, we get lost. We lose our innocence. We begin to be more and more wedded to ideas as being my idea is right and your idea is wrong. Remember, every concept has an opposite. My idea is right, yours is wrong. And then we get into disagreement and we imagine differences and we get into conflict and arguments. Right? That's what Sid would say. It's innocently misusing the tool that we're given. Using it to create experience that accentuates difference and conflict. And that if we stay wedded to conceptual thought, we lose our feeling of connection to life. We lose the feelings of, you take any human being on this planet, and if they're thinking constantly, they're not in a very nice feeling. No, it's just the nature of it. It's not wrong or bad, but we lose feelings of connection and love and caring and compassion and understanding. We're not able to perform as well. We start to believe our thinking to be true. So Sid would say human suffering is really a function of each of us is doing the best we can given the thinking that we think is real. Right? Wasn't that one of your quotes, Rohini, that you
Yeah.
from Sid? I was really reflecting on that. I mean, I've heard it over and over and again. I heard Sid say it a number of times. And boy, is that powerful. That's the way he was pointing toward how we can innocently misuse the conceptual mind, and it leads to greater and greater unhappiness and dissatisfaction and conflict inevitably. It leads to wars, it leads to divorce, it leads to prejudice, and where our judgments seem to be real and true rather than they're just made up thought content. Now, here's the cool thing, though, that was a huge part of Sid's teaching, is there's benefit in that world, and you want to learn how to use your conceptual mind wisely. It's fun. I love duality when it's and tomorrow I'm going to do this, and thinking about my trip, and thinking of my wife as a separate human being rather than we're all just the same energy. I love seeing her as separate, right? And as different, as just using the conceptual mind in a way that it is in service to wisdom. It's in service to wisdom. And then the cool thing, and this was a huge part of Sid's teaching, we can all close the laptop of our computer mind. We can all disengage from the screen of ideas and thoughts and concepts. I love that notion. It's like with teenagers saying, okay, close the friggin' laptop and look up. There's this saying among parents, would you please look up? Because everybody's looking down at their phone or at their screen, and it's like, just look up. And this was a huge part of Sid's message, is that every human being also has already built into us everything we need to look up. And looking up is not a technique. It's not a technique. I can look up, I can look down. Right? I can think about things, or I can wake up out of that thinking metaphorically, and we can, now these are all metaphors. Now, if I'm talking about going beyond the conceptual mind, they're just metaphors. They're not techniques. They're not suggestions of things to do. It happens to everybody. You're looking down and you look up. You have your hand closed and you open it. You're awake and then you go to sleep. Those changes in how we use the mind are built into the mind itself. It's already built in for us to be able to shift gears, if you will. So the good news is, and this was what Sid taught enormously, a huge part of his teaching was we can fall away from personal thinking about life, ideas and concepts. Sid says if you really see thought, it brings you back to the now, where you're wide open and receptive to life. The now is not in time, because time is a function of concepts. Past, present, and future only exist as concepts. When I'm out of my conceptual mind, I'm like a baby, and I'm not in time, I'm not in language, I'm in this silence, if you will, metaphorically. So Sid would say truth is always found in silence. And when we're in that silence, free of the contamination of our conceptual mind, free of our babbling thought system, these are Sid quotes, free of our babbling thought system, free of the noise of our personal thinking, that in those moments, there's just open presence, unfiltered and uncontaminated by the limitation of personal thinking, of the conceptual mind. Now, that's the easiest way to experience non-duality. You've all experienced it tons of time. So another beautiful part of Sid's teaching was we need to get really good at going back and forth between these two worlds.
Champ.
Really good going back and forth between these two worlds. Between using our mind conceptually, where there's difference, and this and that, and me and you. And then going beyond that, and he says both are real. Both are real. there's benefit to both because they're two ways of using the exact same mind. They're not two different things. If we make non-duality and duality two different things, that's a concept that we've created where there's difference. When I go out of my conceptual mind, believe me, I'm not thinking about any of this stuff. I am not thinking about, I'm not interested in duality. There are no camps. There are no differences, right? And the great discovery is when we fall out of our conceptual mind, there's silence and a feeling. And it's not a feeling we can really describe, where you'd have to go back into your conceptual mind to label and describe it. But it's as plain as simple as, it's a nice feeling, because when I fall into this feeling, I feel more connected to life. I experience more the connection, the already existing unity that is true of life. So I feel closer to the tree. That's why people like to go for walks in the wood. They fall out of their dualistic mind into the present now, not present time, and they have experiences of peace and beauty. Just ordinary. I'm looking out now at the ocean and the flowers, and the lettuce we have growing in front of us, the birds at the bird feeder, and to see that through what in Tibetan Buddhism they call newborn consciousness, non-conceptual recognition of life, is really wonderful. It's where we experience love and peace and joy and happiness and beauty. But we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. So true non-duality celebrates duality. It doesn't create, not that duality is the opposite of non-duality, or it would be a concept. True non-duality celebrates duality. It celebrates all of life and every aspect of life. It's an unconditional love for everything human. Our frailties, our foibles, our innocence, our ups and downs, and when I fall out of my thinking, I fall out of my judgmental thoughts, and in a sense, everything is perfect as it is. That's a spiritual teaching, as part of Sid's teaching, is when you fall out of your conceptual mind, where you see life as it isn't, limited, distorted, and judged. When you fall out of that thinking, you begin to see life unfiltered, uncontaminated, and you begin to see beauty. For no reason at all, I begin to feel better. I begin to feel more connected to people and to life, no matter what mood I'm in. I can be in a low mood, and if I'm not in my conceptual mind, I will feel extremely close to my wife. If I'm in a low mood and caught up in my ideas and think they're true, I can feel extremely distant from my wife. And it's all part of what's called the game of life. And it's built into us to wake up and recognize the game for what it is, and then have fun with all of it. Oh boy, I can get caught up and lost and then wake up, and then there's no judgment about that the way there used to be. It's like, oh yeah, that happens. That's part of this whole dance. God, it was so amazing how real that seemed. I really thought for a moment that it was this situation stressing me out. So that's just, Rohini, that's how I've sort of been seeing it, is non-duality and duality we experience every day and don't realize it, and it's ordinary. And if we see differences between all the teachings and teachers, I guess the last thing I'd like to say that came to mind right away is, if we were studying the ocean, it's so vast. And some people will fall in love with studying the waves. And some people will fall in love with studying the currents, and some people will fall in love with the very vastness of the water system. It's not three separate camps. Sid says, if you go deep enough into the principle of thought, you become enlightened. If you go deep enough into the principle of consciousness, you become enlightened. You go deep enough into the principle of mind, you become enlightened. Why is that? They're the same thing, and they lead to the same place. What's the same place? This my reflections, getting ready for this. The we become freer and freer from the limitations of our own conditioned thinking. We begin to be more and more open and receptive to the ordinary beauty of the now. And we begin to experience these deeper feelings of connection, of unity. The experience of the oneness of life is experiencing that it's all the same energy. That's love. And Sid says, if it's total, it's love. I love that quote. If it's total, it's love. Right? It's just all one belonging, one being. And so to get good at going back and forth between those two worlds, in my mind, is to really be, to enjoy both the human and the human being as one.
That's beautiful. I love your reflections and the freedom in celebrating both two ways of consciousness showing up.
Two ways, and the same thing showing up. Yes.
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Well, I see that we have a couple of hands raised. Are you ready for questions now, Dicken?
Awesome. Yeah.
Or comments? I'm not sure what they're going to be.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome.
So we'll first go to Andrea. Hi, Andrea.
Hi there. There's two.
Oh, it's not. Oh, Andrea and Lee. Hi.
Andrea, both of us. And I'm Lee. So
hi both of you.
Andrea didn't know anything about it.
No, I had no clue. I had my foot up here, you know, all casual.
Right. So I have, well, I'm a little greedy because I have two questions. However, they're probably going to be the same answer. And so I'll tell you both of them and you tell me what you think. So the first one is that I seem to get it the wrong way around, because intellectually I'm there, I've got it, okay, I got it. And then there's an internal part of me that's hanging on for dear life. And I come back to the idea. I heard the story of the guy that was told, you know, that you get your best ideas when you shower, and he's asking the question, you know, how many showers should I take? And that's somewhat my question. You'd been talking about we're falling into this non-conceptual and we're falling into this. And my question is, where do I go to fall?
Yeah. Let's take away fall, because that's a metaphor. It's not
right.
Like I fall asleep, and if you ask me how I do it, there's no way in hell I can explain it. And I don't see that as I'm doing something. It's just letting go. You know, Sid used a wonderful metaphor a lot that I've come to appreciate, and it's used a lot in spiritual teaching. I've seen it used as a metaphor in all the great religious traditions, and that's the metaphor of listening. Anytime we're using our intellect, we're thinking about things, so you can't think and listen at the same time. And if I say to somebody, just listen, I've never met a person ever, anywhere in the world, that if I say, just listen for a second, they can't go, okay. Now, would they call that they just used a technique to listen? sometimes people have insight into that what we're looking for, we already have. And it's not a matter of trying or efforting or doing anything. It's just what we do all day long. It's just we disengage from our laptop and fall open to this moment. You can't cross the street unless you do that. You can't drive a car very well unless you fall out of your conceptual mind to a certain degree. You can't keep thinking and be preoccupied and drive without having an accident. I talked to one policeman, he said, all accidents are a function of people being preoccupied. It's not drugs, it's not alcohol, it's that at a certain point they get preoccupied by their own thinking and then they are off the road. They have an accident. Right? So listening has been used. Sid says if you can understand how ordinary and beautiful and the benefits of being resting in this open receptive state, you can walk down the street in a state of listening. Not just listen to some person. You can look at a bird in a state of listening. It just means that temporarily we stop using our mind like a computer. We stop trying to conceptualize and hold on to ideas. And we do that. Everybody is already expert at that. So it's not a matter of learning a new skill. It's not. It's so simple and so ordinary. It's more a matter of just being aware of what already is true. Now, here's one other little twist. For centuries, we've all had a misunderstanding that whatever we feel is somehow created by something outside in the world. And when we begin to see, no, it's being created via thought in the moment. When I realize that my stress is coming 100% from my own thinking, there is a natural tendency to fall out of the thinking that's creating that stress.
Right.
Not a technique. I use the metaphor, if you could put your hand on a hot stove, I don't know anybody in this seminar that wouldn't take their hand off. And it's not, and they wouldn't be asking, now, how do I do it? What's the technique? It's built into us to use our mind wisely, because we do it all the time.
Right.
As we become aware of thought, become aware of pure consciousness, become aware of pure mind, we naturally discover what's already here, what's already whole, what's already true.
Lovely. Yeah. That makes so much, dare I say, sense.
You may dare say sense. Exactly what happened.
So as I said, I'm a little greedy, and that's phenomenal. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
I hope that answers
one final. What's that?
I hope that answers not only the two questions, but maybe any other question you might.
Right. I'm going to ask that final question though. I got to get it out. What's it all about, Alfie? Or in this case, Dicken?
Well, my shorthand answer would be love is the answer for everything.
I love it.
What's love? When we fall open, we get reminded of our true nature by being in our true nature, not by intellectually understanding it. And when we're there, we feel the sense of problem and issue and difficulties goes away, and the sense of possibility and connection gets more foreground. And so the very last talk Sid gave, which I would recommend to every one of you, was called The Ultimate Answer. I mean, it was not his very last talk, it was the last sort of recorded public talk that he gave. And he talks about that when we fall out of our conceptual mind into and then he used every metaphor I think he could think of. I wrote them all down once and it was so fun. Just every metaphor is pointing toward this: listening, presence, pure consciousness, our soul, the unknown, freedom, this. It just went on and on and on. It was like his last chance to throw every metaphor at us to help us experience the simplicity and beauty of this. And that when you touch that space, there's a feeling, and in that feeling, it's filled with the knowledge and knowing of the universe. Right? And so that's why he could say, if you have a problem, if you try and figure it out, it'll get more and more complicated.
Yeah, yeah. So
Fall, metaphorically, fall open to this vaster awareness, then this feeling and knowing will be given to you freely. And you learn to have more and more trust and faith in that, to guide you, to direct you, to solve problems, to help you enjoy life more, to connect more with your kids. That's why he said it's the ultimate answer. So if you ask me what's it all about, that's what comes to mind for me. And I really tested that for 2 years. That was all I reflected on. Is it really? Is it really? When I'm really pissed at my kids, is that really the ultimate answer? Is if I touch that space where suddenly this feeling presents itself, does that then open up possibilities and reconnection and feeling and all the things I'm looking for? Is that true? I didn't want to take Sid's word for it. He taught that very strongly. Don't take anybody's word for anything. You see the difference between using your intellect wisely and unwisely, and you see the absolute joy and beauty of being free of concept, and see what happens. Don't take anybody's word for it.
Fantastic. Wow. That was amazing. Thank you so much, Dicken. Really appreciate that.
You're welcome, Lee. 3-part answer.
Yeah, incredible. Incredible. Thank you.
thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Bye, Andrea. Take care.
Thank you.
All right, so the next person whose hand is raised is Cliff. Hi, Cliff.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you now.
Great. Hi. First of all, I want to say thank you to you both for such a great presentation. Dicken, I've been a big fan of yours on YouTube, and well, Rohini, you know what a big fan I am of yours. So thank you both. You sort of just touched on my question. Actually, you've been touching on my question all along. But I have this experience where I feel like I can get the feeling, I can feel it, and I feel like that's something that I own and I've always owned. And then I think about something in my life that I perceive as needing to be fixed, and I have this idea that I have to apply that thing that I've experienced to that problem. And clearly I'm getting caught up into some sort of process, or wanting for some sort of process, or wanting for some sort of application. And I just don't know how to get around that. I don't know how to let go of that wanting it.
You can't. Your intellect will always, always, always do that. It's built for that. It creates concept, which creates, there's now, I'm feeling this, but I could feel better. Or I'm seeing this situation, but I know it could be better. And so we keep creating this split in our mind.
Yeah.
And then we try to figure out how to fix that split. Right? That's ego's strategy, is to create a problem and then try and fix it.
Yeah.
And so anytime I think about my problems, if I think about it long enough, I fall into that same split because that's what the intellect is built for. Why would I expect it to be different like next year or tomorrow or at any point? Right?
Yeah.
It's not a matter of fixing the intellect. It's a matter of discovering this other dimension where that doesn't exist. The problem goes away psychologically, and then wisdom responds to whatever's going on.
Uh-huh.
Right? So you get more familiar with that dimension of our being.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's
So
no
as you,
fix the intellect or stop it from doing what it does. It does that for every person on this planet. If people think about duality and non-duality, they're going to create a conceptual framework that has duality in it.
yeah,
When they're not thinking about it, they experience something different, and then you don't even think of it as dual or non-dual.
yeah. It's interesting, the idea of getting more comfortable in that other place, and then as you become more comfortable, it's more natural.
In Tibetan Buddhism, they say first we have to become aware there is this other dimension beyond our concepts and ideas, and then we got to get more familiar with it, and then stabilize in it. Now that's a metaphor for the intellect, and it's sort of fun to play with that, but
Yeah.
that's made up too. It's just a way of pointing.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clev. Take care.
Yeah.
All right. Well, next we'll go to Dror. Hi, Dror.
Hi. Am I muted?
Yes, you're unmuted.
Hi, Dicken.
Hey, hi, Drawer. Great to see you.
Always good to see you. I like that you kind of take this conversation a bit more to the non-duality direction of that. What I found recently is that as I like to think, deepening my understanding, I suddenly see other things that trigger my thoughts. On many areas of my life, like I kind of feel like I'm doing way better, not overthink or not get into unnecessary, cycles of thoughts. And then I have those things that suddenly things would trigger me from being in a great mood to a horrible mood. And like looking in hindsight, is something happened that I guess I hold as different than what I thought it may be or should be. And I don't find, I'm not trying to control this. I just find that recently there's less of these, but when they happen, I'm kind of more activated around it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, triggering is a psychological notion that was developed by the conceptual mind to try and explain where feelings come from. It's a concept. I don't find it a particularly useful concept psychologically or spiritually. It's just a concept that creates a sense of problem and creates a sense that something outside of us is causing us to feel the way we do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so the feeling itself can be an invitation to go beyond concepts. And then triggering doesn't even enter into it. And then life happens, and life just is what it is without such divisive concepts of me and you and problem and trigger, and it all of that begins to soften. All of that, the me, the self, and ego begins to disappear. Me, who's here being triggered, disappears. Doesn't exist. It's I think it's very, I love going back to the chapter that Sid Banks wrote on this. It's called The Duality of Life, and you can find it in The Missing Link. And it's, I think, my favorite chapter in the whole book. So triggering is a concept that's based on a very strong sense of the outside other and the inside me, and the outside other triggers something in me. And in the conceptual world, that makes sense. When you go beyond concept, it doesn't even make sense. This whole sense of me being triggered disappears, and then there's a whole different experience of life that's very beautiful. And then you get informed by that, and then you can come back into the conceptual world, and it's a playground rather than a problem. And then you can play with concepts and ideas, and it doesn't limit you in the same way. You can stay lighthearted about the whole affair. I know psychologically the word triggered has been used forever, but I think we're outgrowing that term. It just places, it creates an imaginary two and then places blame on the other. You've caused me to feel this way. And these are all just ideas. We fall out of our ideas, and what we're feeling is not even a problem. It doesn't matter if we're upset. Right? If we're upset and thinking about it, it seems like it can be a problem. If you're upset and don't have any concepts about it, it's never a problem. It's seeing life as it is. Right? I was reading something that Dalai Lama said, that there's two kinds of anger, and basically it turned out one is anger that you're in when you're in your conceptual mind, where you take it very personally and you've created another, and you're blaming and attacking the other person. And then there's this other kind of anger that when we have an experience of anger and we fall out of our conceptual mind metaphorically, then it comes across as determination and resolve. It's not a problem. So you wouldn't say somebody triggered me into an experience that I find valuable. And if every experience is perfect as it is, but for our thinking, right? It becomes a different conversation then. So sometimes I have conversations with people about using their intellect wisely and enjoying the conceptual world, and other times there's another way in which the mind is used that is very, very different. What's problematic in one world is not problematic in the other. What's imperfect in one world is perfect in the other world. But it's the same mind used differently. It's one mind used differently.
Thank you. Thank you, Dror. All right, the next person is Omar. Hi, Omar. Oh, hang on, let me unmute. Oh, there you are.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Rohini.
Hi.
Dicken. Thanks for hosting this. It's always good to be reminded of this, that we are experiencing our thoughts, and I just love Dicken talking. I have a question because I've been experiencing these last 3 days pain in my lower abdomen, and I have a lot of thinking about it, and I don't know if I'm making it up or whatever, but I just feel the pain and I cannot get rid of the pain. And I have an appointment with the doctor tomorrow, so I just I don't know. I just want to know if there is any way to kind of lessen the pain. That would be great. I don't know if it's my thinking. I'm sure it's not just my thinking, but yeah.
When I think about my pain, I want to lessen it. When I'm not thinking about my pain, I just experience it. And the paradox is when I just directly experience anything sort of unmediated by my ideas, the experience of it is different. I've been through a lot of pain in the last 4 years. I've had 4 operations. In the last 3 years, I've had 4 operations and had a lot of pain. And it's been very interesting to wake up out of my limited conditioned thinking about life and pain and see what's there. Experience life directly. The ego is always trying to get away from it's the movement toward trying and effort and better and more and getting and acquiring. That's the language, if you will, of the intellect. There's a time and place for that. But I've found it very interesting to just be aware of the difference in experiencing anything, whether I'm in my thinking about it or not. Anything. Any moment. The difference between when I'm in my thinking, looking at the tree, and then I have all these ideas about trees show up, and when I fall, metaphorically I'm talking, fall out of my conceptual mind, the labels disappear, I seem to disappear. There's nothing but this. There's just awareness, presence, aliveness, beauty, as it is. Doesn't matter what mood I'm in, doesn't matter what I'm feeling. We can experience to experience the aliveness of life itself. People have been using metaphors for centuries trying to describe this, that no matter what mood you're in, there's an underlying sense of joy or happiness that's always there, or an underlying sense of love that embraces everything that comes and goes. It's not human, it's a divine love. It's the experience of our true nature as one. Even during pain. Sid Banks was in great pain a good part of his life.
Thank you.
It's interesting. You see what you can see, Omar. It's interesting. Just see what you can see.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for this beautiful words.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you, Omar.
It's
Thank
already
you so
better.
much. There you go. Well, thank you, Dick. And that brings us right up to 5 o'clock, so perfect timing. And I just want to thank you again. Just from being on the call with you, just kind of like Omar was struggling. He was in physical pain. I was really, today I've been kind of caught up and my feelings have been hurt and I've been taking things personally. And so just by sitting here and really getting open and listening, I can just feel all of that softening and lightening. And so, to have things said like, oh, it's the ultimate answer, like again and again, I experience that in my own life. there isn't really an answer needed because there isn't a problem, but it's that feeling of openness and that feeling of just being in the moment, good mood, bad mood, taking things personally, whatever. It's like there's a difference in being open than being caught up and tight in that. So I've personally benefited greatly from today. So thank you. And I'm sure we all have. And I'll let everybody know the next webinar, if you'd like to join, is going to be on July 22nd at 11 a.m. Pacific with Aaron Turner. So love it if you could join then. And anybody who's interested in participating in the 7-month program, you know, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to have a conversation with you about it. And looking forward to staying in touch.
It's a great program.
Thank you, Dicken. Thank you for the endorsement.
Just give a shout out to
well, thank you.
Unbelievable series of speakers and what happens to people in that group, and the way Rohini, along with Angus, orchestrate just beautiful space for reflection. That's my 2 cents here.
Well, thank you. Well, I'm going to let everybody say goodbye to you. So I'm going to unmute. If you don't want a lot of cacophony in the background, then get off now because I'm not going to unmute everybody.